Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Shira Gill. Shira is a world-renowned organizing expert and the best-selling author of 3 books, Minimalista, Organized Living, and Lifestyled. She's been featured all across the popular press. Good Morning America, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Goop, Forbes, People. I think we covered every segment of our listener base with that. And she's also a business strategist offering support and mentorship to female founders all across the globe. And today, I hope she's going to help us see why less can be more. Shira, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So I made sure to declutter my desk before we got on today. How am I looking?
You did great. It's looking sparse back there.
Okay, good. Very minimalist. And that's actually what I was hoping we could talk about today. So when it comes to being a minimalist, what do you wish more people knew?
Well, the main idea I would say is just the idea that your life can be better with less. I think often people think about less as robbing themselves of something or depriving themselves of something or living in scarcity. And what my work and just my personal life have shown me being a minimalist is really the benefits have bled into every area of my life, from having more time to do the things I love, more energy. And really, I would say minimalism is about maximizing as opposed to restriction. I think it's really about freedom.
That's interesting. So the freedom to be able to do more or feel different?
Yeah. So in my work, I've spent 15 years helping people declutter their homes and lives and now minds. And I think the thing that I've seen again and again, especially, I live in the United States, is our Western culture is just drowning with stuff, and not just physical stuff, but mental stuff as well. Pressures, to-do lists, notifications, social media. I think it feels relentless to people. And so what I have found is we all have this choice every day to decide what we let in to not just our physical spaces, but our lives, like which plans we say yes to, which obligations we take on. And what I have found is that I call it practicing the rule of one. So it's basically saying, like, a silly example would be, instead of having 10 winter jackets, I'm going to have one really good puffer. And I have had that same puffer for years and years and years and years. It served me really well. I never lose it. I take better care of it. And then, in our personal lives, like I have one big goal a year instead of I used to have 9 million that I would lose track of and not really do justice to any of them. So it's this idea of really intentional constraint with the goal of improving and maximizing our lives and giving the time and energy and bandwidth to the few things that really matter most and letting the rest go.
Right. So it's not about owning less or doing less. It's about doing the right things better.
Exactly. Like one thing I like to say to people is you don't actually improve your life by doing more. You improve it by doing less of the stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. So really getting intentional about that.
Exactly. And I think minimalism is a word that really freaks people out and makes them take a few steps backward sometimes. And so I like to replace that word with intentionality or intentionalism, because that's what it's about. It's about determining the right amount, the right volume for you in whatever category, which your perfect volume is going to be quite different from my perfect volume.
So let's dig into that just a bit. This idea of sort of changing from the outside in, which is one of the keys, I think, of, living a more intentional life, is having that sense of what's really important. And one of the ways that you say that we can get started with this, at least in our physical space, is really having a clean space. Now, you can preach that. Like I'm all in. I'm all in. And my wife helps me even more. But I have to tell you, I know folks out there who are high performers, but you take a look at their desk, you take a look at their house, and it's a hot mess. I mean, it's like a natural disaster zone. So for those out there who aren't convinced, make the case for a clean space.
Yeah. So I think, science and research shows that a cluttered space creates mental clutter. And so if your brain is working overtime processing extra stimuli, you're not going to be able to perform as well as if you have clear space and your brain gets to rest and
Mm.
focus on one or two important things. So that's kind of the like neurological part of it. But what I've seen anecdotally is that clutter and mess and having too much to manage leads to not just stress and overwhelm, but for many of my clients, anxiety, even depression, a lot of guilt, shame, and things that really bog people down and make them feel stuck or even paralyzed in all areas of life, from like performing at work to nurturing their relationships to taking care of their bodies. And once somebody's space is edited and organized and really functioning for them, I see people getting out of debt, supersizing their work, dating after divorce. Like it really is this kind of Kickstarter to free up mental bandwidth that you can now allocate to things that are much more interesting than cleaning up piles.
Right. And it's something you can control.
Yes. And there's so little we can control. So I think that's how I got started in all of this, was feeling so overwhelmed by the world as a little kid. And I went back and forth from house to house. My parents divorced when I was quite young, and everything felt out of my control. And I think what I realized very young was I can control my environment and how I feel in my environment. And that actually can shape how I move through my days and how I show up in the world. It's pretty powerful what working from the outside in can do.
It's really more than just, getting rid of things or just like putting things off to the side and sort of physically moving the junk in different places. This idea of a clean space is really about regaining focus and intention and energy. So what are some ways that people can start to actually act on that and bring out more of the benefits of a clean space?
Yeah. So I think, the number one thing is always starting with the clarity of why. So the question I always ask people is, what do you want more of in your life? And what do you want less of in your life? And most people will say, like, I want to spend less time looking for things or hunting things down or getting behind on bills that I have missed or getting behind on work projects, right? So less of that, but more maybe freedom or creativity or time to curl up with a good book, right? So you've got to find whatever really feels compelling to you. That's step one. Then it's kind of looking at everything that surrounds you physically through that lens of, is this getting me closer to the thing that I want most? Or is it creating clutter or distraction or a roadblock?
Hmm.
So the reason I became a minimalist in the first place was I just wanted to travel the world. And I realized if I was spending all of my time cleaning and organizing and dealing with clutter, I couldn't hit the road. I couldn't rent my house out, which, back in my 20s is how I paid for my travel. So I was highly motivated, and I saw a direct correlation between owning less and being able to do more of the things that I enjoyed. And I think when people start to experience that link, it just makes them more and more motivated to let go, which is very hard for most of us.
Yeah. So it's like having a clear picture of what you want and then identifying the things that are holding you back from what you want and sort of creating that side by side comparison of here's where I want to go, but here's what's keeping me from where I want to go and how to get there, and then making decisions along that matrix.
Exactly. You nailed it.
So let's turn to the workplace, because I think for a lot of our listeners out there, this is where being more intentional about how they structure their day and their life and their work, it can seem like a challenge because so much of the
Right.
workplace today is the opposite of that. It's about business and more, right? More meetings and more to-dos and more productivity and more and more. It just seems like it's harder to build a culture that puts a premium on simplicity and focus. What could leaders do to help address that?
Yeah. So I think it's about getting really clear on the desired outcomes. And, most companies can't have 45 desired outcomes at one time. So it's really getting very focused on what are the few priorities that are going to move the business or the venture or the mission forward, and being willing to let go of other things that don't serve that, or being able to put them in the parking lot or table them, right? Everybody wants to be able to do everything well all at once, but we're human beings, we're not robots. And so everybody has limited capacity. So I think as a leader or as a manager of other people, it's about really getting clear on these are the 2 or 3 top things that we're working on, say this month or this season. Other things are going to be able to go lower on the list until we tackle these big, rocks. And I think what's difficult is people don't want to say no to anything. They don't want to let anything slip through the cracks.
Right.
But I think if you want to have a community of people that are able to perform to their highest capacity, you can't give them more than they can handle. And we see this all the time with corporate burnout, with people quiet quitting, with, people hitting a wall of feeling like what's being asked of them is unmanageable or unfair. And so I think what a great leader does is they get really real about what is that big, most important thing. That's what minimalism is all about, is clarifying what is the most essential thing. And even for me running a small business, I do this for myself every year. Like at the end of December, I say, what's the one big thing I want to accomplish in the next year? Is it writing a book? Is it doubling my income? Is it launching a course for people around the world? I know that I can't do many, many of those at the same time. So I force myself to practice that constraint.
Right. You can do it all. You just can't do it all at once.
Yeah, you can't do it well.
Right.
And I think
Right.
ultimately people in business want to be high performers. They want to be successful. So it's keeping your eye on the prize of what's the main thing I want to be successful at in this moment or in this season, and getting very clear about what can be let go or delegated during that time of pursuing that one key goal.
So we've talked about this trade-off and this tension of having stuff and having space. But when it comes to shared space, whether that's in the home or the office or the home office for some of us, so we
Yeah.
can't always control that arrangement, right? One person's minimalism is constantly bumping up against another person's clutter. So how do you think we might go about negotiating that?
Yeah. And to totally normalize this, I am a card carrying minimalist professional organizer married to a reformed slob with ADHD. So if
Sounds
we
like
can do it,
what could go wrong?
it could go wrong, right? So I have, in my own life had to figure out a solution for this, right? Like everybody has a different clutter threshold and everybody has a different style around how they tidy or organize or don't. And so, what has worked really well for me, both with my clients and in my own home, is very clear boundaries when people have different clutter thresholds or styles. So, like an example is, during COVID, all of a sudden, I was working from home. My husband was working from home. We had 2 kids doing Zoom school. We're in a tiny bungalow in the Bay Area, and it was a nightmare. And so, we basically split up our house into zones. And like one of those zones was outside on the patio. And we ended up building a small shed in our backyard that became my husband's workspace. And the rules of that workspace were I am not allowed in. I am not allowed to judge it or to reorganize it or to give him any grief about how he is in that space. But then, of course, the counter agreement is he's willing to maintain the dining room and the living room and the kitchen where I spend most of my time when I'm working from home.
Mhm.
So I think it's about having, whether it's at home or in a workplace, figuring out very clear physical boundaries, whether it's a partition or just even saying like, I'm claiming my own desk workspace. I'm going to keep it as clean or as messy as I want, but I will respect all of the shared communal spaces. What I've really found is people don't change just because you want them to or because you even ask them nicely to. So I think it's really owning your own needs and wants around your space. Like since I'm on such a extreme end of that spectrum, I've kind of reconciled with myself. I will do more work to maintain and create systems in our home because I live with teenagers and a dog and a husband with ADHD. But it's worth it to me, right? To own that instead of walking around grumbling all the time and being resentful. That being said, there are some kind of common shared philosophies and rules that we've been able to instigate as a family and implement, which is basically like our shared spaces are for everyone. And so we've determined a baseline that we all agree to maintain. But then my teenage girls' rooms look a whole lot different than how I would love them to look, for example.
Great. Works in progress.
Yeah. I think it's all about finding the compromise where everyone can get what they need somewhere, but not necessarily everywhere.
Right. And so everyone has clear expectations and a little bit of flexibility so that they feel like they're able to sort of settle into their mode that works best for them while still respecting the boundaries and the parameters and the wishes of other people.
You got it.
Well, she might be a minimalist, but this conversation had maximum value. Shira Gill, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thank you so much. This was fun.